happens in relationships when mental health shows up? When you care deeply about each other, but something internal keeps getting in the way? Welcome to Evolve Your Intimacy with Dr. Stephanie. I'm Dr. Stephanie, licensed professional counselor, certified sex therapist, and clinical sexologist. And this is a special series where we're diving into the real, often misspoken ways mental health disorders impact intimate relationships. Throughout this series, we're going to break down some of the most common mental health challenges like anxiety, depression, ADHD, trauma, and so much more, and explore what they actually look like inside a relationship. This is about understanding what's really happening right beneath the surface so you can stop repeating the same cycle and start building something more intentional. So whether you're struggling or you love someone who is, this series is for you. Stay tuned.
You're listening to a sex-positive podcast, and I genuinely hope you're having a lot of fantastic sex. And if you are, you're probably getting STI tested, and that is fantastic. But let me tell you what it's like to be someone who looks at STI test results all day, every day. My name is Robert, and I'm the founder of shamelesscare.com. Here's the reality. Everyone fears HIV, but what we see constantly are bacterial STIs. Gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis. They're common. They're frustrating. They spread easily, especially through oral sex. And yes, unprotected oral sex is unprotected sex. Well, that's where DoxyPep comes in. DoxyPep is a single dose of doxycycline taken within 72 hours after unprotected sex. And it dramatically lowers the risk of contracting gonorrhea, chlamydia, and syphilis. And here's something I see almost every week. Someone tests positive, they get treated, and then they order DoxyPep. And I can't help but think, if they had known about it earlier, maybe we could have prevented that result entirely. And that's why I'm telling you now. Go to shamelesscare.com and use coupon code EVOLVE. That's shamelesscare.com, coupon code EVOLVE.
Hello and welcome. This is where we talk about what's really happening in your relationship. Not just the surface level conversations, but the patterns underneath them. I'm Dr. Stephanie, licensed professional counselor, certified sex therapist, and clinical sexologist. And Evolve Your Intimacy is about how mental health, desire, communication, and emotional patterns all shape your intimacy. Because your relationship isn't about what's happening between you, it's about what's happening inside each of you and how that shows up when you try to connect. If you've ever felt close one moment and then completely disconnected in the next, you are in the right place. What if I told you that the thing that is slowly eroding your intimacy isn't what your partner did? It's what your mind won't stop whispering they did. Or even worse, what if your mind keeps suggesting what they might do? Because when you live with OCD, you don't just have thoughts. You have thoughts that feel urgent, intimate, dangerous at times. It's like something inside you needs to be solved right now. And in a relationship, those thoughts don't stay contained. They show up through your text, in your questions, in the way you pull close or push away. They show up in bed. They show up in silence, in the space between, are we okay? And I don't know what the hell I'm feeling. Over time, they can start to feel like distance. Today, we're talking about when OCD invades intimacy, loving through the uncertainty. And we're getting into what OCD actually is and what it isn't. Why your thoughts can feel so convincing. How love turned into reassurance and reassurance is a trap. And how to build intimacy that doesn't collapse under uncertainty. If you've ever laid next to someone and thought, why can't I just feel settled? Or why do I need to ask this again, even though I already know the answer? Stay with me. So we're going to talk about the types of OCD that you don't hear enough about. When most people think of OCD, they picture hand washing, checking a lock, or something visible. But in relationships, OCD is often invisible. It lives inside the mind. And it's far more common than people realize. OCD affects approximately 2 to 3% of the population. That's millions of people. But here's what's important. Many of those individuals don't present in obvious ways. They're not always washing their hands or checking the locks. They're lying next to their partner, questioning their thoughts, trying to feel certain, trying to feel settled. So in a relationship OCD, sounds like, do I really love my partner? What if I'm settling? What if there's something better? And then there's a thing called harm OCD. What if I hurt the person I love, even when you have zero desire to do so? And then we have this moral OCD. What if I'm a bad person? What if I've done something unforgivable? We also have sexual intrusive thoughts that feel completely misaligned with your identity or values and create intense shame and confusion. And here's what matters clinically. OCD does not randomly choose its targets. It goes after what you care about most. If your relationship matters to you, that's exactly where OCD is going to attack. Not because there's something wrong, but because your brain is trying to protect something it cannot fully control. If you don't understand OCD correctly, we will respond to it in a way that makes it even stronger. OCD is not a personality. It's not a preference. It's a neurobehavioral disorder built in a repeating loop. Obsessions are intrusive, unwanted thoughts or images or urges, while compulsions are what you do to quiet the obsessions. In a relationship, compulsions are often not visible. They sound like questions, reassurance, confession, checking in. The thoughts feel important. The anxiety feels immediate. The urge to resolve feels undeniable. And when you respond, you get a relief. Brief, fleeting, almost addictive relief. Just enough for your brain to learn, hey, that worked. Let's do it again. And this is where science matters. Research shows that compulsions, especially reassurance, negatively enforces the OCD cycle, meaning they strengthen the brain's belief that the thought was dangerous in the first place. So instead of decreasing anxiety long-term, they make the next wave come even faster and even stronger. Intrusive thoughts are universal. OCD is not. Here's something most people don't know. Studies have shown that up to 90% of people experience intrusive thoughts at some point. Thoughts like, what if I swerve my car? What if I drop this baby? Most people dismiss them. But with OCD, the brain flags the thought as significant. And now it becomes, what does it mean about me? Why did I think that? What if I lose control? So the issue isn't the thought itself, it's the relationship to the thought. So OCD feels so convincing because it operates on one core driver: intolerance of uncertainty. The brain is trying to answer a question it cannot answer with certainty. Am I sure? Is this right? Is this safe? But here's the reality. There is no relationship on this planet where you can be 100% certain all the time. But OCD does not accept that. It keeps searching. And the more you try to solve it, the deeper you go. The emotional and relational impact of OCD is not just exhausting internally, it spills outward. Research has shown that OCD is associated with higher levels of relationship distress, increased reassurance-seeking behaviors, emotional withdrawal and avoidance, decreased relationship satisfaction over time if it's untreated, because people with OCD, they're not just thinking, they are constantly trying to regulate anxiety through the relationship. And that shift from connection to management is detrimental. So before we go any further, hold on to this. OCD is not about the content of the thought. It's about the urgency to resolve it. And when the urgency enters a relationship, it doesn't just affect one person. It reshapes how both people connect. And if you don't understand what you're looking at, you'll respond in a way that will unintentionally make it stronger. So next, we need to get very clear on what OCD is not, because this is where relationships start to fracture. OCD is not about being a perfectionist, like things like cleaning, double checking your work sometimes, being type A. That's personality. OCD is distress driven. It sounds more like, what if I hit somebody with my car and didn't realize it? What if I don't actually love my partner? What if I cheat and ruin everything? What if I'm a bad person and don't know it? And these thoughts are unwanted. They're repetitive, they're kind of sticky, and deeply anxiety provoking. And this is where we need to say something very clearly. Having the thought is not the same as wanting it. But OCD doesn't care about logic. It cares about certainty. And certainty is one thing you can never fully give it. OCD doesn't stay contained inside one person. It enters the space between two people. And that's where intimacy starts to shift. Because intimacy isn't just about being physically close. It's about feeling emotionally safe, emotionally present, and connected without constantly questioning what's happened. OCD disrupts all of that. When intimacy becomes something you analyze instead of feeling, you will start evaluating your relationship. You might find yourself thinking, do I feel enough right now? Was that moment meaningful? Am I connected or should I be? Even in moments that are supposed to feel natural, your attention shifts inward from experience to assessment. And when that happens, intimacy starts to lose its ease. So emotional intimacy requires vulnerability. It requires letting yourself be in the moment without needing to define it or prove it. But OCD introduces a constant question. Is this right? So instead of simply being close, you're searching for confirmation that the closeness is real, and that creates pressure. Pressure on yourself to feel a certain way, pressure on your partner to respond a certain way that reassures you. And over time, connection starts to feel like something you have to get right. In intimate moments, this often shows up quietly, not as a direct question, but in a way you seek confirmation through their tone, their eye contact, their level of engagement. You may be trying to answer questions like, ooh, did they feel that too? Or are they as into me as I am into them? Was that even enough for them? And now, instead of sharing a moment together, we're trying to interpret it. So a big question is, what happens in physical intimacy? That doesn't just affect emotional closeness, it shows up in physical intimacy too. During sex, the mind can drift into, am I into this enough? Should I feel more right now? What if this means something's off between us? And in those moments, your body is present, but your mind goes somewhere else. You're watching, you're measuring, you're trying to decide if this experience meets some internal standard. Unrealistic, but it's a standard. And when intimacy becomes something you're monitoring, it becomes harder to actually feel it. From the outside, your partner may not understand what's happening. They may feel like you're distant, like you're not fully present, like something is missing, and they interpret your internal experience as rejection. When in reality, you're not pulling away because you don't care, you're pulling inward because your mind is trying to make sense of something that it can't fully resolve. So now you have two different experiences happening at the same time. One person is internally questioning, is this right? Am I enough? And the other is externally feeling, why do they seem so far away? Why doesn't this feel as connected as it used to? And then this is where intimacy gets very misunderstood, because it's not that connection is gone, it's that it's being interrupted. Over time, the relationship itself becomes something you're trying to evaluate. Instead of asking, how do I feel with you? It becomes, how do I know this is right? And honestly, that shift matters because intimacy is not built on certainty, it's built on presence. And OCD pulls you out of the present and into the constant measurement. This is the moment that changes everything. When couples stop saying we're disconnected and start saying we're caught in a pattern. Because once you can see it, you can stop reacting to each other and start understanding what's happening underneath. And one of the biggest ways this pattern keeps repeating comes from something that looks like love, support, reassurance, the instinct to make your partner feel better. But in the context of OCD, that instinct can quietly keep both of you stuck. So next, we're going to talk about the reassurance trap and how to support each other in a way that actually protects intimacy instead of eroding it. So now we understand something important. This isn't about your thoughts. It's not about anxiety. It's about what happens between you and one of the most powerful patterns that develops in that space, looks like love. It sounds like support. It feels like connection. But over time, it becomes the very thing that keeps you stuck. So why does reassurance feel so right? Reassurance is one of the most natural responses in a relationship. When your partner is distressed, you want to soothe them. You say things like, I love you, we're okay, nothing's wrong. And in most situations, that builds closeness. It creates safety and it strengthens the bond. But in OCD, reassurance functions very differently because it doesn't comfort the person. It teaches the brain something. And that reassurance teaches the brain that every time reassurance is given in response to an intrusive thought, the brain learns that this thought was important. This feeling needed to be solved. This is something we should be checking. So even though the anxiety goes down in the moment, that cycle becomes so much stronger underneath. And the next time the thought appears, it comes back faster, more convincing, more urgent. So let's slow down inside the relationship. A thought shows up. What if something is off between us? There's a shift internally, tension, discomfort, uncertainty. So you reach for your partner. Are we okay? Do you still feel the same way? And they respond, of course we're okay. I love you. And for a moment, you feel grounded again. You feel closer, relieved. But then later, that thought comes back. And now you need reassurance again and again and again until intimacy starts to revolve around calming the anxiety instead of actually connecting. And so what does this feel like for both people? It's a great question. For the person experiencing OCD, it feels like you need reassurance to feel settled, like something is unresolved until you hear it. And there's often shame attached to that. Why do I keep needing this? Why can't I just trust the feeling? And for the partner, it starts to feel like nothing you say sticks, like you're being asked to prove something over and over and over again. And eventually, you may feel drained, frustrated, even disconnected. Not because you don't care, but because you don't know how to make it stop. This is where a shift happens. Reassurance starts to take the place of a real connection. And instead of sharing a moment, you're managing the feeling. Instead of being present, you're trying to fix something. Instead of intimacy being something you experience together, it becomes something you constantly are trying to stabilize. And over time, that changes the emotional tone of the relationship. But here's a hard truth. Reassurance feels like love, but in OCD, it often functions as a compulsion. And compulsions keep the cycle alive. That doesn't mean you stop caring. That doesn't mean you become distant. But it does mean something has to shift. We have to shift from fixing to staying. So instead of asking, how do we make this go away? The question becomes, how do we stay connected while this is here? Because anxiety is not the problem. The relationship to the anxiety is the problem. For the person experiencing OCD, it might sound like, I'm noticing the urge to ask, and I'm going to sit with it. Not perfectly, not easily, but intentionally. And for the partner, it might sound like, I'm here with you. I care about you, but I'm not going to answer that in a way that feeds the cycle. And that can feel uncomfortable at first because it's different, but it creates something deeper than reassurance ever could. What you're rebuilding here is a different kind of safety. Not safety based on answers, not safety based on certainty, but safety based on presence. The ability to stay connected, even when things feel unclear. And that's where intimacy actually deepens. So now the question becomes, how do you actually do this in real time? How do you interrupt the pattern that feels automatic and create something different between you? That's what we're going to move into next, because insight is powerful, but change happens when you practice together. So we're going to talk about a weekly relationship repair task, rebuilding intimacy in the moment. This week, the goal isn't to eliminate the thoughts, it's to change how you show up each week. It's to change how you show up with each other when they appear. Because intimacy isn't built when everything feels easy. It's built in the moments where it would be easier to disconnect, but you choose to stay. We're going to practice, and this is something you can do together, not perfectly, but intentionally. And so step 1, we're going to recognize the moment. We're going to notice when the shift happens, when the thought enters, when that tension rises, when the urge to ask, check, or pull away shows up. Instead of immediately reacting, we're going to pause and name it. This is one of those moments. Not something is wrong, not we need to fix this, just this is the pattern. Step 2, we're going to turn towards each other instead of towards the thought. This is the most important shift. So instead of turning towards the question, we're going to turn towards the partner. And that might look like sitting closer, making eye contact, reaching out for their hand, and saying something simple. I feel the urge to ask right now, but I want to stay with you instead. Or I'm here. We don't have to solve this. This is where intimacy starts to rebuild, not in answers, but in presence. So step 3, create a 10-minute connection window. For the next 10 minutes, the focus is not on the thought. It's on each other. No reassuring, no analyzing, no fixing, just connection. You can sit close without talking, breathe together, maintain physical contact, or softly share what you're feeling without trying to resolve it. This is about letting your nervous system settle together. Step 4, stay in your body, not in the mind. If the mind starts pulling you back into the question, gently return to the body. Notice your breathing, the warmth of your partner's hand, the feeling of being physically close, because intimacy lives in the body, OCD lives in the mind. This the connection, instead of reinforcing the OCD cycle. You're not trying to get rid of OCD in 1 week. We're building something deeper, the ability to stay connected without needing certainty, the ability to feel close without needing answers, the ability to choose each other even when your mind is pulling you elsewhere. Because over time, these moments add up. What used to feel like distance starts to feel like I can be in this and still feel close to you. And that's the foundation of real intimacy. If something in this episode felt familiar, if you saw yourself or your relationship in these patterns, that's where change begins, because awareness isn't the end of the work. It's the beginning of something different. And that's what this podcast is here for, to help you understand what's actually happening underneath the surface so you can build connection that doesn't fall apart under pressure. If this episode resonated with you, don't just sit with it, use it. Take one piece from today and bring it into your relationship this week, because insight without action doesn't create change. Intentional behavior does. If you want deeper support, tools, and structured guidance, you can explore my workshops and relationship resources at evolveyourintimacy.com. And if this episode helped you feel seen, understood, or gave you the language for something you couldn't quite explain, share it with your partner. Sometimes the most powerful way to start a conversation is not by finding the perfect words, but by pressing play. And if you haven't already, make sure you follow the podcast and leave a review. It helps more people find this work and start changing the way they show up in their relationships. Until next week, stay connected, stay curious, and stay intentional about the way you show up in your most intimate relationships.